Hello everybody, this is Llodg, and today I am back to reviewing Metroid games with Metroid Prime Remastered, which was released on the Nintendo Switch earlier this year, and was released on the Nintendo GameCube over 20 years ago. If you want to hear my thoughts on some other Metroid games, I reviewed 5 of the 2D Metroid games 2 years ago. What do you mean it was 2 years ago? Now, unlike my other Metroid reviews, I actually had played this game before. I own the Metroid Prime trilogy that released on the Wii, and I only ever beat the first one and thought it was okay. I wanted to go back and play the other games, but that game didn't really grab me enough to do that immediately. Though after playing so many Metroid games and becoming a pretty big fan of them, I was excited when this remastered version came about. This version is the same one that was included in the Wii trilogy, but they updated like every texture to make it look so much better. So with that, let's get into the game. So we start out with Samus responding to a distress signal at a space station above the planet Talon 4. And man, I gotta say, Samus looks amazing in this game. For the first Metroid game in 3D, Retro Studios hit it out of the park. Though I guess we have Super Smash Bros. On Nintendo 64 to thank for giving us Samus in 3D. Also, this Metroid game is a first-person shooter, and this release actually gives us a couple of control options. The original control scheme from the GameCube release, motion controls similar to the trilogy release, a hybrid of motion and normal controls, and a dual-stick control scheme that is what every other FPS uses these days. And the last one is the one that I went with, though I do think motion controls are pretty cool since you literally aim the arm cannon. Anyway, we explore the space station and find that something on the ship must have gone wrong as we see rubble and space pirates that are dead on the ground. Pretty pivotal gameplay feature in this game is the scanning mechanic. So throughout the game, you will find different objects that you can scan and it'll give you a brief description of said object, or even just basic lore. The scan mechanic is honestly much bigger than I would have thought. Sometimes you have to scan things for them to even activate, and later on you have to scan to find clues for certain artifacts that I'll talk about more later on. But as we go further into the station, we find one of the experiments the space pirates are working on, the Parasite Queen. With her being the first boss, we were actually able to scan her and learn her weaknesses, and since we just started out the game, it's pretty basic, just shoot her until she dies. If you're ever unsure of what to do to beat a boss, scanning them will generally give you a good idea, if they don't outright tell you, though most of them will be your typical shoot them with your arm cannon and missiles like previous games. Oh, and the scan for bosses takes a bit longer than usual, so be prepared to dodge a little bit while scanning them. And I will say that I was not the biggest fan of scanning when I first played the game, though as you'll see, I kind of became obsessed with scanning, try to scan everything, and it's just kind of what you have to do with this game. You have to accept the scanning mechanic because of how big of a feature it is. Anyway, we defeat her and she falls into the reactor. I'm not sure why the space pirates decided to put her on top of it, but here we are. So we have to evacuate the station similar to how we did in Super Metroid, and just like that game we have a ton of time to do so. As we were trying to find our way out, we come face to face with Ridley, and he has been souped up with metal armor and these really cool wings. I didn't mention it before, but the entire Prime series takes place after Zero Mission and before Samus returns, so Samus said a lot between those two games, but that also means that this is the first time Samus has seen Ridley since we beat him in Zero Mission. And he has a new form in the name of Metal Ridley. Anyway, he leaves before we can do anything to him. Before we are able to take the exit out of the station, an explosion hits Samus and somehow destroys her armor and all her upgrades from Zero Mission and brings us back to base Samus in this weird armor. At least this game gives us an explanation of why we don't start out with any of the upgrades. We are able to make it off the space station and chase after Ridley onto the planet of Talon 4. And this is where the game actually begins like the previous Metroid games. You explore around, find upgrades, beat bosses, and get stronger. Despite it being a fully 3D game, Metroid Prime's gameplay is surprisingly similar to the 2D games, which is very cool, and maybe the first 3D search action game. It does have to change a few things to accommodate for the game being in 3D, like an entire map also being in 3D. This map is actually really good, especially since I feel like they could have made it a lot worse. I barely ever got confused on where to go and where I was going, though there were a lot of times that I kept checking the map just to make sure I was going the right way, since it can be kind of a hassle if you make a wrong turn. One thing that I'm not the biggest fan of with the map is the lack of points that show where the missiles and energy tanks are like in 2D games. There are a lot of missiles, energy tanks, and even power bomb upgrades hidden around the world, but since you don't have anything actually telling you where these collectibles are hidden around, I ended up missing a lot of them, but I would find some of them later on. I guess they couldn't add a dot like 2D games, since that would look weird in a 3D map, but I don't know, I think adding in something could have helped since there are so many items around. Talking about the upgrades, now I'll go into talking a bit about the upgrades Samus can get throughout the game. You eventually do get back all the items you had at the beginning of the game, which is nice, but you also get some new ones. The biggest new items, and kind of what the whole Prime games are known for, are the different visors. There are 4 visors you receive throughout the game, though 2 of them you have from the beginning, like the combat visor and scan visor. But then you also have the thermal visor, which helps you see heat signatures, and the X-ray visor, which allows you to see through things, like an X-ray would. And I generally like the different scanners, though I wish the thermal and X-ray visor were more pleasant to look through, because it can be hard to tell what is going on while having them activated. I think they are better used in short bursts, like when you're trying to find an item around, or when you have a boss that quickly requires you to use it. But in some areas, like in the Space Pirate Research Lab, when all the power goes out, you have to use it for so long, and man, it just looks like a mess of orange and purple. I got through the area fine, but I was so happy once I got back to regular lighting. Some bosses also require you to have these different visors for a long period of time, and every time I just want the fight to end quickly. It also made me use them less for exploring because of how much I disliked looking through them. I get the developers not wanting them to be more useful than the combat visor, but I wish they would find a middle ground that would make me want to use them more often to look for hidden items. Different type of beams also return. They are pretty unique and actually have different uses, which is pretty cool. They can also be used to affect different stuff in the environment, which I think might be a series first if I remember correctly. Unlike the visors, I actually want to use the different beams whenever I could, though there are points when an enemy can only be hit by a certain beam, but it was whatever. There are other upgrades that return from 2D games like Space Jump, Morph Ball, and stuff like that, which is always nice to see, and doesn't make this game feel weird for not having them. All the upgrades are really nice to use, and there are even a couple that are optional but really cool to have. I even missed these upgrades on my first playthrough on the Wii, which shows how bad at these games I used to be. Like having the flamethrower or wave beam attachment is just so cool to have, though it will run through your missiles so fast. Like Fusion, Metroid Prime only uses one missile type for all the different type of weapons, so you only have to find one type of missile capacity upgrade for all your missile-based weapons. Also, it's weird that Fusion and Prime share this because these games actually released one day after the other. Man, what a great week for Metroid fans. We need more days like that. Metroid Prime also has a variety of areas to explore, and I really like them all, and they are all unique enough to tell them apart and also have a variety from each other in their own different areas. I know I've played this game twice, but I'm able to really remember the map well enough to know where I got certain upgrades, or where I blew up the glass to get this upgrades, so I have to give the developers props for making this game memorable enough to know these areas so well. The areas also have so much lore within them, like what the ancient Chozo were doing or what the Space Pirates were experimenting on. Once again, making this game mechanic one of the most important ones in the game since so much story is hidden within these scannable objects. So if you're ever curious to know more about the world, just go around and scan anything and everything. There are cool puzzles that aren't all that difficult to figure out, but it can be a nice change of pace, with some time challenges or climbing up the wall with the Morph Ball, and even though it's 3D, there are still some 2D sections when using the Morph Ball, and it's pretty cool. I mean, nothing groundbreaking, but I enjoyed it. Also, I'm glad they made the Morph Ball third person. First person Morph Ball would have been really weird. On a side note, I am really glad they added in a Morph Ball jump, which made getting some energy tanks so much easier. I honestly just like all the Morph Ball things they add into this game. I think all of them are so cool. Like the other games, there are different suits, though I'm sure you could guess that since we started the game out with the Varia suit. You eventually get all the same suits as the other games, with what may be my least favorite gravity suit, which is weird because Super Smash Bros. Brawl was my first introduction to Samus, and these suits are what I kinda knew her by, but I'm just not a big fan of the light purple for the gravity suit. But this game also introduces a new suit, and what may be one of my favorite color combinations for a suit in Metroid, the Phazon suit. Don't worry what Phazon is just yet. The red and black just looks so cool on Samus. I don't know what to say, the suit doesn't help you too much. I mean, the gravity suit still gives you the best benefits, like being able to walk through water at a reasonably fast pace, but this is just a really cool suit. The bosses in this game are also really cool. They aren't a lot of returning bosses from the 2D games, which I think is good, especially since this is a totally new planet, though the new ones have a lot to live up to, and I think most of them are great. With the scanning feature, I was never unsure of what to do to beat them, which is good, and I didn't have too much trouble actually beating them. Honestly, I don't think this game is all that hard. That's not to say I never died, because I did die quite a few times, but compared to Dread, I died way less. Though in my first playthrough years ago, I died a lot, so who knows. Maybe I'm getting better at games, or maybe I just found more energy tanks. There are a couple of returning enemies, most notably the Metroids, and there are a lot of different types of Metroids in this game, even ones that were able to be defeated without an ice beam. The Space Pirates have really done a lot of different experiments on these guys. Honestly, I really like the enemy designs in general. I think they are really cool, especially the Space Pirates. I think they look so good in this game. Except for maybe the Omega Pirate, I didn't think he looked as good as he could have. I haven't talked about it much yet, but the graphical updates they did for this remaster are incredible. Without looking at any comparisons from the GameCube original, you might not think that this game looks all that much better, but I am begging you to look at a side-by-side comparison. They made the textures look so shiny and amazing. This might be my favorite looking Switch game yet, and really makes me excited to see what Prime 4 could look like. Though we got a bit more waiting before we see that game. I also really enjoyed the little details in this game, most of all whenever you fire a missile close to you, you're able to see Samus's eyes, and I didn't notice it as much in the Wii version, but I see it a lot and I always really enjoy it. Another detail I like is the hand positions for the different arm beams. Like, nothing would have changed if they just had colored boxes for the different beams, but making them have different hand positions for what Samus actually does to use that beam is really cool in my opinion. There are a lot of cutscenes in this game, but they don't really add much to the overall story, and unlike Samus Returns and Metroid Dread, they don't make Samus look super cool. I mean, she does some pretty cool flips and all, but the Mercury Steam Samus is still my absolute favorite. Something that really annoyed me was that the plus button was for the map and the minus was for the pause menu. It just seems backwards to me, and you notice I pressed on the map when I really meant to go to the main menu, and vice versa. I thought that this game was fairly well paced. Even if you don't know where to go, the game will eventually tell you where you should go next, which I really like. I really like it when it gives you a bit more lore about why you should go there. It's a small thing that you can turn off, but in a game like this, especially with how big and 3D it is, it can be nice to know where to go next if you are lost. Though sometimes it can take a while to come up and I end up on the wrong side of the map trying to find where to go next. And worst of all is when I'm exploring something new, and then it tells me to go to the next door, which I was gonna go there eventually, just let me do it without pointing me in that direction. I feel like I was finding so many different upgrades and knew where to go next based on those upgrades, and then you find one of these artifacts. Now they are necessary for the game to progress, but in the moment it can just feel so bad when you think you're going to get something cool. But no, it's just an artifact. And I had a lot of issues with the artifacts on my first run through this game, so I went in not liking them very much. And I should probably explain what the artifacts do. So basically Town 4 is an ancient Chozo world, and these artifacts hidden around will reveal the impact crater from like a meteor or something, which also brought about the Phazon onto the world, and this Phazon is creating so many problems. All the artifacts are hidden around the world, and this area gives you all the clues you need to find them. I think the idea was that you should be able to go about the game and find them as you progress, but I only found like 3 before I really had to find them. I remember I had to look up where the artifacts were when I first played it, but on this run I was actually able to decipher the clues and find them pretty easily. Honestly, the clues basically tell you exactly where they are, so it's not that hard to find. I just wish they gave you something cool to progress because it just feels so useless compared to a new suit or something. Also, this game is a bit different from the 2D games by only looking at item percentage to determine the kind of ending you get, so as long as you find everything, it doesn't matter how long it takes you. I'll be honest, if you're able to find all the missiles without a guide, I salute you, because I don't think I'd ever be able to do that, though I'm just happy I got 77% of the items. And before I get into talking about the ending of this game, I wanted to talk about the music, because it is really good in this game. The ambient music in this game is probably some of my favorite in the series, and whenever I hear it, I immediately think of Prime. Like, the chanting vocals are amazing, and I haven't even talked about the returning tracks. Like the Magmore Ruins takes heavy inspiration from Norfair's music. It never stops me from smiling whenever I hear it. Also, the Space Pirate battle theme is stuck in my head. Like, the guitar screeching or whatever is something I'll never forget, and also think of the Space Pirates. Overall, I think the sound design is really good, and I don't even think they changed it up for the remaster, though I could be wrong. So after traveling the planet and gathering all the artifacts, we return to the Artifact Temple and put in all the artifacts to finally travel to the Impact Crater. And oh my gosh, Meta Ridley's here. Despite seeing him a couple times throughout the game, we finally fight him at the end in an honestly really fun but difficult battle. On my first run through this game, I died multiple times to him, but I was somehow able to barely beat him, and I mean barely. I thought it'd be so much easier with a normal control scheme and actually competent gameplay, but I was wrong. Then the temple just shoots out a ton of lasers at him to finish the job. Like dang, this temple has some issues with robotic space pirates, I guess. With that, we are able to travel to the Impact Crater, and this is where all the Phazon comes from. But luckily we have the Phazon suit, so it's not as bad as it could be. We eventually make our way through and find the Metroid Prime. That's right, this game is named after the final boss. The Metroid Prime is the reason for all these terrible things happening on Town 4, and we have to fight it in a really cool fight with multiple phases and everything. It has us needing to use all the different beams and be on our toes to not take too much damage, and after a really long fight, we defeat her. Wait, now we have to fight its core essence? Yeah, this is one of those fights in games that makes you think you won and gives you a whole other different phase to fight that has you use all your different visors. Sadly, I died and had to do the entire Metroid Prime fight over again. That's right, Metroid Prime really sticks to its guns about the save rooms. There are no other saves or checkpoints anywhere, so most of the time you have to be wary about your health. Though in the final area we don't have much of a chance to do that, so I have to quickly do the entire fight again, though luckily I end up with a lot more health, and am able to defeat its essence. As a last ditch effort, this blob grabs onto our suit and actually takes away our Phazon suit, leaving us with just the gravity suit as we have to evacuate immediately. Despite it being a great place for an evacuation section, the game just lets us leave in a cutscene, which is kind of disappointing. And with that, the game is over. I finished the game with 77% item completion at about 13 hours. There's also a scan completion percent, but it's not required for anything other than maybe seeing all the stuff in the gallery. I like seeing stuff like concept art in these models, though if it wasn't included, I wouldn't complain at all. Just something cool to see. In case you were wondering, as far as I can tell, the fusion suit isn't included in this release, which is weird, but I guess it was too difficult to find a clever way to add it in. Overall, this was one of my favorite Metroid games. When I played it, I liked it, but wasn't too keen on the idea of playing through the other two games immediately. But now I'm basically a series veteran, and I enjoy this game so much more. In case you were wondering where this sits among my favorite Metroid games, I'd probably put it just behind Super and Dread, though it is very close to those two. And on another playthrough of any of those games, I could very easily see some of them switch. Even while writing this review, I kind of want to bump up Prime above Super just for how well it's aged. Even though it is easily the longest Metroid game I've played, it didn't feel overly long like Samus Returns. Though I wish there was a faster way of moving throughout the map, especially when I'm in the complete wrong direction for progression. And I just have to walk really far because man, this game is big and Samus walks slow. I am really glad they added in all the control schemes in a way that feels good to play on the Switch. Oh, I should probably let you know what happens if you get 100% item completion. In a cutscene that I totally didn't take from a video from YouTube, we see a hand rise up from the remains of Metroid Prime, and the hand even has an eye in it. And this probably doesn't mean anything important. But yeah, that was Metroid Prime Remastered, a really good game that I'm glad is on the Switch finally after all the rumors, and it exceeded expectations. Now we wait for Prime 4 and hopefully Prime 2 and 3. The last rumors that I heard were that 2 and 3 would be like the Wii versions ported without all the cool graphics, but I'm really hoping they make them look nice because that would be great. So with that, I hope you enjoyed the video, have a good day, and wait, Samus is a woman?